Welcome to Ask Earl Anything. This is the show where your questions make the show. If I don't have a question, I don't have a show. So this week's show is coming in between my first live Ask Earl Anything, which I am now retitling to Drum Hang with the Hammer. Now that's my first version of retitling. I told that to my wife I was going to do Drum Hanging with the Hammer, which actually came to me from my guest last week, which was Chadwick Perry. After the show, he said, you should change the show name to Drum Hanging with the Hammer. So I did, and I did one, and I took a little clip of the last show and said we're going to rename it to Drum Hanging with the Hammer. But I'm not sure if Drum Hanging with the Hammer is where I want to go, or if I want to go with Hanging with the Hammer. So, there's connotations to these things, but my wife thought Hanging with the Hammer was better. So, Chad, I'll probably end up going with Hanging with the Hammer. But anyway you look at it, the live stream show's got to have a different name, and that's where we're going to go. We're going to go to a different name for the live stream show. Now, the live stream show will be a question show, or sometimes I will bring guests on. And my first guests were Chadwick Perry and Tate Berkey, two guys I've talked about before, so check out their channels. And we had some really cool discussion about drumming, drum covers, Chicago, Nashville, playing. We did all kinds of stuff. We went all over the place, and I had a lot of fun with those two guys, and it was very impromptu. We also took a few questions, and this next show I want to do questions, so I don't plan on any guests that would be coming on the next show. Now, my first impromptu Ask Earl Anything live was Mike Fasano. So within this live stream world where I've done 3 of them, one you cannot find anymore. I deleted it somehow. That's a whole nother story. But my second one being Mike Fasano impromptu Ask Earl Anything live, and the official Ask Earl Anything live, now renamed Drum Hanging with the Hammer, with Chadwick Perry and Tate Berkey. You can see that I, in the last 2 weeks, have kind of been really playing along with the live stream. But I have figured a way to do it using something called StreamYard. It worked really well, and I was happy with it. And I want to thank everybody that helped me get this dialed in. And I'm looking forward to doing some live streams. And the next live stream for Hanging with the Hammer will be Saturday, Saturday, March 20th at 9 a.m. I'm going to go 9 a.m. till when I'm done. If it's 10 minutes, I don't have anybody there, or if it's an hour and a half like we did last time, we'll go an hour and a half. It'll definitely be over by 11 for sure. But if you want to ask questions, come to the live show, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I don't know what time it is for those of you that watch, but I think it's late enough for the European guys. It may be a little early for my West Coast guys, but I think Mike Fasano gets up early, so who knows. 9 a.m. may work for him, may not. It's 6 in the morning. So it'll be kind of tough. I was thinking about going 10. I may go 10 in the future, but we're going to give this a try. Now, this show is Ask Earl Anything, where you ask questions. So I usually start out with a shout-out. So I have a shout-out today, even though I've mentioned a few of my friends. My shout-out today goes to Kelly Cusimano, Kelly Can Drum, who's back up online, got his studio going. It's rocking. He's got a new drum kit. He's doing covers. He's giving away stuff. Help him get some subscribers. He even had my good friend Steve Delamar show up on his show and at his house and do a drum cover from his drum kit. I thought that was kind of cool. So check out Steve Delamar and Kelly Cusimano, Kelly Can Drum, and check their channels out. I think both those guys are worth looking into and watching. Matter of fact, most of the guys that ask questions that have drum channels, I will recommend, checking out. But those two guys are players. Steve's got an electronic kit, plays a lot on acoustic kit out, but he has electronic kit for his home work. And Kelly's done all kinds of stuff. I've done some work with Kelly where I worked on his last album, did a couple drum tracks. That was a lot of fun before he had his daughter. I believe it's a daughter. His baby came. It was right before the baby came. I remember that, doing his project. And anyhow, good memories, fond memories of doing some work with Kelly. Kelly's a great guy. He also had me on his first It wasn't a live stream, but it was a Skype show, and he interviewed me. And maybe I'll have Kelly on the show sometime. That would be kind of fun to go back and give a little bit of love back to him. So I probably will be reaching into the community. If this Hanging with the Hammer show takes off and people like to watch it and I find the right time that works for me and you, this could be a weekly feature. It could turn into a weekly feature where I just start doing them once a week on Saturday mornings before I get into my day of drum covers. So that's a possibility. So that's definitely something to think about. All right, so let's talk about some questions for Ask Earl Anything. My first question comes from Martin Medrano. Martin Medrano is the guy that asked me to do all kinds of Carpenters songs. So let's talk about the music of the Carpenters. And the question is it just me that asks you to cover the music of the Carpenters, or do others ask you to do that? Also, that cover of Calling Elvis was great. Keep it up. He liked Calling Elvis. I enjoyed doing Calling Elvis. If you haven't checked out my Dire Straits cover of Calling Elvis, check it out. I'm playing double drums. I play some brush pattern through the whole song, and then I do the crazy pattern. I did it with a little bit of Earl personality, of course. And there's not a drum cover I do that doesn't have a little bit of my personality in it, that's for sure. So, to answer your question, Martin, you are the main guy that asks me for the Carpenters, but whenever I put up a Carpenters tune, there's always somebody else that gets on the Carpenters tune and eventually asks me for another Carpenters drum cover. I've covered all the major ones, and the only one that I keep getting asked to do is something called Calling Occupants. It's a really strange tune. It's really cosmic, I'll put it that way. There was a band that did it. They started with a K, and guys in the 70s thought it was the Beatles reformed. It wasn't the Beatles reformed, but they had that kind of vocal thing going on. Anyhow, the Carpenters picked up on it and did the song too. I may do that someday. It's just not in my wheelhouse of knowledge right now, so I'd have to work on it. If you don't understand how I do drum covers, I did really go into that in depth with on that last show with Chadwick and Tate, and I talk about how I do drum covers, and pretty much how I do drum covers is I turn the cameras on and then I start playing the music, and many times I haven't played the music for a long period of time, or I've never played the music. Today I was doing a song that's going to come out. It may have come out before this. It may not have. Called Smoke from a Distant Sky. I love one-hit wonders. This was a one-hit wonder song. It's got a huge shuffle groove. I have never played it, but I've listened to it my whole life, ever since it came out. Every time it comes on those radio, I hear it in the food store or something. I want to hear more of it. I put it into my playlist. So it'll be in there to listen to over and over again. It's got a beautiful shuffle. It's kind of funky. So anyhow, I decided to do it. I had never played it before, never even tried playing it. I sat here for 45 minutes. I banged out probably 7, 8 real takes of it. And almost all of them were pretty good. But I found the one that I liked the best, and that's the one I'm going to release. And that's how I make drum covers. I basically just play them over and over again. But I have to have an affinity to it, and that song I had an affinity to, so I really wanted to learn. So Calling Occupants is not one of the songs that I'm really wanting to learn. So I'm going to do it one of these days, so I promise, Martin. One of these days it will come. All right, my next question comes from Brian Curry. Brian Corey asked this question. He says, I know you just bought an 18-inch 2002 Crash. Have you thought about gradually adding more Red Label 2002s to your arsenal, like the Sound Edge hi-hats and the Ride? It would be awesome if you would answer my question. No problem, Brian. Yes, I have thoughts of buying either the 15-inch Sound Edge hi-hats, the 14-inch Sound Edge 2002 hi-hats, or what I really want to get next really is the 22-inch 2002 Ride, just a Ride. Not a power ride, not some other funky ride, some other name to it, just the 22-inch Ride. I really have an affinity for playing 22s these days. So, and I really dig the 2002 Alloy. Just something about it. I've played B20 Alloy most of my life, so I have a real understanding of Sabian and Zildjian. I love the darker cymbals and I love having them, so I have options here. But I have found for a lot of this pop recording I'm doing, you know, the music of the 70s and 80s, 2002s just cut through and they sit in the mix really nice. So I really like 2002s. When will I buy it? Will probably have to do with when I acquire some cash. I am doing some lessons now. I've got one Skype lesson coming up, and I've got another guy in town that wants to take lessons. I'm not advertising I'm doing lessons, but if the right guy asks me to do lessons, I will work with them. And of course I charge for that, so any of the money I put towards doing lessons will probably go towards my next cymbal. That's the way I usually do it. Studio sessions and lessons and things like that I put towards new gear usually, except for maintenance gear like heads and things like that. So, but I don't know when I'm going to get it. That's the next question. All right, the next one comes from Ready Eddie 101. I believe his name is Nick, by the way. I called him Eddie. He said my name is Nick. But when you say Ready Eddie, it makes you want to think your name's Eddie. But anyhow, I said fantastic cover. He has a couple questions here. Very intricate drumming. This was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, by the way, which I found out was released. It was released by Drum Lick, I think he goes by, or Drum LCK. He doesn't have the I in it. I think his name is John. He's a friend of Drumman 190s. I think he was his teacher at one point. Maybe still is. He did Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and got it on YouTube. And as soon as I saw that, I freaked out. And I said, I'm going to put my old 2018 cover of 50 Ways up. And I did, and I didn't get blocked. And I was happy. Of course, I got cocky that same week. I did Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Spinning Wheel again, because I wanted to do it drumless anyhow. Got two great versions of that. It said partially blocked, and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to release it, and I released it. And partially blocked for Spinning Wheels meant it was partially blocked in 151 countries, leaving only a mere less than 10 countries it was actually seen in, and I got about 5 views on it. So it's good to know I hit parts of the world that nobody else gets, because truthfully 151 countries means the major countries in the world did not see that cover. So that was kind of funny. But anyhow, I took it down. I said it's not worth keeping up if only 1 or 2 people are going to see it every month or so, and it's not in the stream, so not worth it. But it is released on Instagram TV, so if you catch me on Instagram and you go to my Instagram TV, I've got a whole bunch of covers that I can't release on YouTube, and that happens to be one of them. But this was based on the Paul Simon 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover cover. He asked, do you have a rhyme or reason for using grip? Now, for your drum grip. Now, the reason he asked me that question was I did 50 Ways using traditional. Well, the reason I used traditional on that, I'm going to turn that off. The reason I used traditional on that was because Gad plays traditional, and I decided when I played it in 2018 I would do it traditional. I don't find my traditional playing to be all that great. I don't have power with my left hand like I like. I even think some of the subtleties are not there that used to be there. But when I play brushes, I tend to play traditional grip. When I play jazz, those kind of grooves, I will a lot of times play traditional grip. But for the pop rock stuff, I don't. So I do choose the grip based on what I'm doing. The next question was, have you done much studio drumming during your drumming career? And I would say I have done a fair amount of studio drumming. He said it's hard to break into, and he's correct about that. I did not break into studio drumming, but I have done drumming for people. I'm on about 16 albums. I built this studio to do work with local artists and get on projects and do things. So I love recording drums. I love being a recording drummer. I think YouTube is an extension of that. The amount of songs I've played on YouTube is really me playing studio drummer on camera, which is fun. I have a lot of fun. I feel very comfortable with a click, but I very much understand why I would not have made it as a professional studio drummer in the 80s or 90s. There are things I've learned about my playing by recording myself over and over again that I realize I have like a push on the first beat with my bass drum. I'm usually a little ahead. That's really not cool. I have learned how to lay back on the click with the snare drum. I think I have good time, but solid studio time I didn't have when I was younger, and I've learned how to, I've really worked on my time. So that's something that's there. Now, the types of drum covers I do, a lot of times, the time moves. I'm very good at following people. So I've learned how to kind of work with that. And I don't always have a click on these songs, and I don't always use the drum track as a guide either. But usually it's one or the other, a click or the drum track. And I kind of can feel where the musicians are going. So that's kind of a live playing thing that I've adapted to. And I wouldn't say my time was ever bad, but there's a way you play in the studio that's studio time. But I wanted to be that guy, and in 1999, when I built my first studio and I started building it to do my wife's project and eventually her album, the goal there was to be a studio drummer. And at one point, I wanted to be the guy in town that played everybody's stuff. I am no longer that guy. I don't really think I bring a lot of creativity to guys' projects of the new era. I don't have gospel chops, and I don't enjoy the chopped up, play the verse over first, and then we'll go back and do the choruses kind of thing. Or recording with just a scratch guitar and a click track, which I've done a lot of, by the way. I enjoy playing with musicians, and the way I envisioned studio recording was the days of studio recording. The way it used to be in Nashville, the way it was in LA. When I talked to John Robinson this year, when I did that interview, it was really talking about the heyday of recording with musicians in a room. And I think most of those studio guys love doing that. Many of those studio guys have learned how to make a living without having to do that by doing it at home. And I think that's why your Aaron Sterlings are excellent players. They've learned how to make a living doing that from their home and playing whatever's needed. But when you hire a session online drummer, it's different than doing a session where you bring them in and you're telling them what to do. A lot of times the online drummers are going to give you a couple alternate takes and that's it, and they're paying you. You know, you're paying them for the song. But if you've got Kenny Aronoff doing it, you better be trusting Kenny Aronoff to be playing your stuff the way you want it. But in Kenny Aronoff's heyday of being a studio musician in LA and Nashville, he was a guy that would go in the studio, work with the artist, work with the producer, and they would throw ideas around. So working alone and doing sessions at home like it is today, that's studio work. It's not as much fun unless you're working with people. So I have a local project my church does. It's called Paradise Hymns. It's on Spotify. I'm on a few of those songs, playing percussion or playing drums on a couple of them. I don't play drums on all of them. We've recorded a lot of the drums down here, though, with the other drummer, John Wagner. But it's always fun to record here together because at least, even though I'm playing with a scratch guitar and a click, I pretty much have input of the producer and the writer of the song a lot of times will be here, and we'll talk about parts. But it's a different type of studio recording today. It's not sitting in a room and having to make it up on the spot. A lot of times it's sitting in a room with a scratch track, having nothing really to inspire you, having to make up a part that kind of fits what somebody's trying to tell you the part's going to be. Like, yeah, I really want just quarter note on the kick, and I want you to play on the tom, some kind of like marchy tom thing. You know, that's what a lot of worship music is. So it's interesting, but it's not as exciting as what I remember studio recording to be. In my early sessions, my first recording sessions were me playing with live musicians. I played percussion on a gospel track in college with live musicians. I played in Nashville with the band Saved by Grace, live rhythm section, cutting the songs that was exciting to me. That's exciting. You don't get to do that as much today, so the world has changed a lot. All right, the next question. Now, I think did I get the last question? Oh, you asked, one other question you asked, Nick, was unrelated. Who are some of the professional drummers that you admire most and why? Simply put, the guys that are the studio players. You usually hear me talk about Jeff Porcaro, John Robinson, Steve Gadd, Rick Marotta, and you can just about talk about any studio guy, Ed Green, Jim Gordon, Jim Keltner, Rick Marotta. I said Rick Marotta, didn't I? Alan Schwartzberg in New York, Hal Blaine, Earl Palmer, Paul Lime, Bill Maxwell. These are all guys that played on a lot of records. And these are the guys that I followed when I was young. So I really love studio drummers, the guys who play on the records. My other favorite drummer is Danny Serafin, from Chicago. Now, what do I think of all the great rock drummers? I think John Bonham's great, and I think Ringo's great, and I think Charlie Watts is great. Well, kind of, sort of. I've never really gotten Keith Moon, but I always loved The Who with Simon Phillips. I thought they were great with Simon Phillips and Zach Starkey, Ringo's son. But there are so many drummers that I admire and love. There's jazz guys like Elvin and Tony and Max Roach and Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson and Ed Shaughnessy. There are so many drummers I love and admire. But I would say the guys that inspire me are the studio guys because I've always wanted to be a studio guy. All right. My last two questions come from Steve Bettigan. And Steve asks the question, how do you muffle and tune your bass drum? And then he asked me, how many snare drums do you have? Can you tell us about your snare drums and how many you have? Your snare sound always seems to be perfect. It's on 2 different Instagram videos he asked the question. So let's do the snare drums first. I have about 10 snare drums, I believe. I have 4 that are my main snare drums. My main snare drums are a Ludwig Black Beauty, a Noble and Cooley solid shell drum 5x14 that I really love. I've had for quite a few years. I had it refinished the color of my kit, kind of, in a Noble Cooley-ish way last year. But it's from 1994. It sounds awesome. This DMR cast aluminum snare drum, 6.5x14, and then I've got a 7x14 DMR walnut drum, this one right here. And these are my 4 main drums. I have about 6 other drums that I use, and I cycle in and out of things. I have a Gretsch drum that matches the kit that I didn't buy with the kit. I've got an Acrolite that sounds great. I've got a Steve Jordan 6.5x13. I've got a Omar Hakim 5x13. I pull them out once in a while. I've got a Gretsch 5x14 chrome over brass. It's a really nice drum, but it doesn't sound like the Black Beauty. The Black Beauty sounds like the Black Beauty. I think those are the 4 drums that I really love to play, but I do pull out other drums once in a while just for different things. I think I'm back to 10. I just sold my 10x14 marching snare drum Yamaha to a friend. And that's how I bought this Paiste 2002 18-inch Crash. I sold it. He so desperately wanted it that I had to sell it to him. And he offered me a price that was better than more than I paid for the drum. So I just said, you know what? He wants it. It makes him happy. It just sits on my shelf for the most part. It's been in about 3 or 4 videos. One being Do They Know It's Christmas? One being the Carpenters, Goodbye to Love. And the other one being another a Chris Tomlin song that I did. It was kind of a hymn readapted. And I did a little lesson on. And I get a lot of hits on that video. So those 3 videos, the only ones I remember actually pulling out the white snare drum for, the white Yamaha snare drum. As far as bass drums go, and I sent you a video on how I tune this bass drum and how I muffle this bass drum. I used a Remo muffle, sub-muffle system on this bass drum. It used to have the Evans EMAD on it. Matter of fact, it has the Evans EMAD head on it, which is the Evans 56 EMAD, but the EMAD system broke. It just fell apart, which they do after a while. I don't know how long this will last, the submuffle, but the submuffle is pretty much identical to that. It works along the same lines as that one, and it sounds great. You know, it sounds great. I didn't want to change the Evans 56 because I've been getting such a great bass drum sound for the last year on this drum, and everybody compliments me on the bass drum sound of this 20-inch bass drum. It seems like this 20-inch bass drum does no wrong, but I knew that a long time ago when I did a concert with a band called youyr. We played at Creation Festival in 1990, and it was this bass drum getting mic'd, going through that PA system, and the sound guy said, "That's an amazing drum, that drum. It sounds awesome." So there's something about the Gretsch bass drums that are just incredible. By the way, the drum on my concert tom kit is a Gretsch bass drum, 22-inch, 14 by 22. This is a 14 by 20. So that's it. There's nothing in this drum touching the back head. There is a small pillow touching the front head, and the front head is a Renaissance Power Stroke 3 with a hole cut in it. So it's got a little bit of muffling on the head, but that pillow touching it is just a little bit more. That bass drum has this Remo head that's got a little pad on the bottom, and I forget what it's called, a power something. It's kind of similar to doing the EMAD with external muffling on it, but it's just on the bottom. And that bass drum head on the front of that bass drum right now is a Power Stroke 4 that I used for a long time on the back head on a 22-inch drum, on that drum, I think. And I'm planning on cutting a 12-inch hole in the front head, right dead center. I just didn't do it. I put the head on, and then it sounded pretty good, and it's got a little bit of a blanket leaning against the front head, and it sounds punchy. So right now, I've got a two-headed bass drum with no hole cut in it. This one's got a small hole cut in the front. And everything goes through my DAW, my DAW, and that's how I get my sound. So that's pretty much it. That's Ask Earl Anything, this show. Your questions make the show. Without your questions, I don't have a show. Thank you all for asking questions and being a part. I'm hoping that the new live format will be cool for some of you and you'll enjoy it. But I will continue to do Ask Earl Anything like this and take questions from my videos where people want to ask questions. And I do enjoy doing this show. It's been a long time. I think we're in our 80-something show right now, so maybe 90. We're getting close to 100 shows on Ask Earl Anything. So thank you all for being followers of the show. I always enjoy getting your feedback. Remember, your questions make the show. If I don't have your questions, I don't have a show. Thank you all for watching, and have an awesome day.